Forgot to go full screen here. There we go. And all right. Welcome everyone to Office Hours with Cloud Posse. It is March 25th, 2026. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. For those of you who are new to Office Hours, this is where we discuss the latest DevOps news, AWS announcements, Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community. Plus, there's a live Q&A at the end you can't find anywhere else. So real quick before we get started, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse has developed the ultimate infrastructure as code framework. We call it Atmos. If you haven't heard about it and you're running Terraform or OpenTofu, you should definitely check it out. Just go to atmos.tools. Quick note, how to get the most out of today's session. The format is informal. Engage as much as you'd like and ask questions in the chat. If you're curious about any of our open source tools like Atmos, this is a great place to ask. And if you're watching the recording, keep in mind these calls are live. Don't miss out. You can join us at future sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. I do have one small ask. If you find any portion of today's session valuable, share it with your team. You'll find all the recordings at youtube.com/cloudposse. So with that said, let's jump into announcements. So what's been dominating my feed is everything going on with Trivy. I think this was something we were even talking about last week, but the saga continues. And the blast radius of this has just been tremendous, the number of projects affected by it. Michael, Rose Security here on the call, has written up a post of his summary. He's gone way deep into this. I'll share it here in the chat, but I thought, Michael, since you've gone the deepest on this, why don't we hear it straight from you?
Sure. Yeah, I thought this was a really interesting kind of, like you said, saga that's been going on, and the blast radius and kind of the response of the community at the same time. I think it was Friday, I had just logged on in the morning and I was scrolling through my notifications and came across a GitHub discussion talking about how Trivy had been compromised, and there was no security advisory or any bulletins at that point. It was just a discussion that I kind of got lucky to catch at the top of my
Wow.
feed. Started looking into it and seeing kind of what had happened behind the scenes. The Trivy, GitHub actions, specifically around the setup Trivy, as well as the Trivy action, and then the binary itself had been compromised, and the blast radius was pretty large. So it was tricky to decipher kind of what was going on, because a lot of the information that we were receiving from the Aqua security team was either incomplete or incorrect. So it was really difficult to determine, what the extent of the damage was. And so going back and taking a look at the pipeline, seeing, what the extent of it was, and how the credential stealer actually worked and where it was sending that information. So it was some really interesting stuff. I've still been following it, and you can see like it continues to evolve into something that's been called a canister worm, which is now affecting the NPM ecosystem as well with a worm. And so there's been a lot going on behind the scenes
Yeah.
with that. Something that I found really interesting, and more from like a GitHub, TTP perspective, and I can drop it here. Um, this was something I was just looking at the other day. I'm not sure if you have access to the chat, if you could, but if you see here, I was curious. There had been a lot of information about what the GitHub action, how that was compromised. But if you look at this commit right here, you can see from like a PR review perspective, it's really not that much. It's two workflow files and about 14 lines of changes, and you can see some of them are very simple. Just changing a single quote to a double quote, some white space changes. But that line 81 down there, where it changes the SHA from for the GitHub for the actions checkout, it changes it to a separate SHA. And then it also on line, what is that, 131 down there, adds the validation skipping and the integrity check skip for the Go releaser process. So whenever the Go binary is published, it skips the integrity check. But the really interesting part with line 81 is if you look at this commit right here, that I just dropped the link for it in the chat as well. You can see at the top, it shows that this isn't actually connected to any commit or this isn't connected to the repository. It's basically a fork. Somebody forked it, committed it, and you can still reference this commit
Mm.
SHA with the parent ID of actions checkout. So you can see here that they updated it to be a composite action that still uses the actions checkout and then basically goes and fetches from that C2 domain the malicious code and does that build. So you can see where it does the skip validation, builds the binary as intended. This just absolutely blew my mind when I saw it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
all very transparent, and it's insane that within the GitHub ecosystem that you can fork, create a commit, and reference that as the parent namespace. That just absolutely blew my mind. So this is something
yeah.
I kind of have been
It,
looking at.
it's pretty scary when, there's everything has been pointing to, or like it's a kind of become a GitHub Actions best practice to do SHA pinning with the trade-off that it's a bit opaque.
Yep. Yep.
But then when any dangling commit, like you said, is
Yeah.
associated with the same repository, this is lending all of its credibility to
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is just
So
so
I
disconcerting.
found this the other night, and it kept me up because as an open source contributor, you see tons of commits where if you're
Yeah.
pinned to Shaw's, you're just like, oh yeah, that looks legit, and you just hit approve. Um, and so this was really an interesting find, and I think I've been more astounded by kind of the community's response to all of everything that's been going on. I don't know if there's a general lack of awareness, but like I think it's really important that we bring up some of these conversations about how this stuff works internally and why does it work that way, and can we,
Yeah.
strengthen the security of the community around some of this stuff. So that was a new kind of attack vector that I recently discovered that I thought was interesting.
Well, and it's interesting, well, how like you can do GitHub SHA pinning and you can require, you can have a policy to require this now.
Oh, I didn't
But
know that.
yeah.
That's cool.
But but it has still that same dangling
Yep.
commit issue, I think.
Yep. Yep.
Like, this is useless if you can't require it to be a dangling commit, at least within the repository itself. But even
Mm-hmm.
then, it's like, I mean, anyone with the right permissions can create a dangling commit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Someone also pointed me, and I haven't fully tested the tooling yet. I'm not sure if it's called Zizmore or Zizmore. You might have covered it on office hours here before. I dropped the link, but it's a static analysis tool for GitHub Actions. And somebody
Hmm.
said that there is some built-in logic for addressing this, where if you scan, it will see if that commit actually exists on the repository or if it's somewhere else. So I thought that was an interesting call
Until
out
Sizemore
too.
itself is compromised.
Right? That's yeah. Now my mind goes there. I hate being so cynical, but
I know. Well,
yeah.
and not to call anyone out, but like there was a cool project shared in our office hours channel today. But when you look at the commit history, it's like just a few days old, and it's a GitHub
Yes.
username, and it
Yep.
operates on with your AWS credentials to navigate AWS, and it's just like this is why we can't have
Yep.
good things anymore, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, it's so disconcerting.
Yep.
But the good thing about this is it can't go on this way. This is going to have to force radical change pretty quickly. I can only imagine a code red is going on inside of GitHub right now
Mm-hmm.
on how to resolve these things. But it does look like an interesting tool. Also made me think about step security.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They have some interesting GitHub actions we've talked about on office hours. They kind of let you set up a sandbox environment on your runner. So things like supply chain attacks that go to untrusted domains automatically are firewalled. And it makes me a lot more keen on that now. So another interesting part of this that you call out in your article that made this all possible is a insidious typo squatting that I didn't catch until I continued reading the sentence.
Hmm.
My eyes just autocorrect that as I read that. And if you're not seeing it, the I and the T are transposed. And then they just like we saw with the rest of it, everything is just passed through with a little surprise uh,
Hmm.
that they're the man in the middle.
Yeah,
Um,
that domain was registered about 2 days before the attack, but still the timelines with the attack are interesting to me because I think there was some stuff probably going on behind the scenes because they were compromised earlier in the month. I want to
oh
say maybe
yeah,
March 1st. So it's all one continuous timeline in my mind.
yeah. I mean, it's just part of the same hack. The hackers just didn't finish the
Hmm.
job. But there was the entire Trivy GitHub repository was deleted. GitHub restored
Yeah.
it, and then they rotated the credentials, but they rotated the wrong credentials, or not all of them.
Hmm.
And so it continues.
Yes, yes. But I guess the moral of the story is if you use Trivy or whether that's the Docker image, the actual binary, any of the GitHub actions, just make sure you assess if you've been potentially compromised because it's pretty far-reaching and insidious. So
It is very. All right. What next? Anyone have questions or anything more to add to this? All right. So next up is just a reminder. Kind of we alluded. Oh, okay. So I guess we didn't finish that conversation. So continuing on that thread, another project, LiteLLM, was also compromised. So the blast radius is in the millions potentially affected by these changes. Plus the Node.js ecosystem. And then just being weary. This is semi-related to the above. Oops, to the above. But just being weary of all these new projects. Like my LinkedIn is flooded with just, hey, I just open sourced this thing I vibe coded over the weekend. That's a copy of this other thing I saw somebody else vibe coded. And then like even in Slack communities, we try and moderate our community pretty well, but it still happens. I've seen projects that, you know, people are, hey, just looking for, advice on projects similar to this one. And then they link to that, and then you see that that's a vibe coded project over the weekend. And some of this common telltale signs of poorly constructed projects are gone, right? They can be super, super professional in their design. Um, so, so talking about projects on
Uh,
GitHub, go on, Michael.
yeah, our this running, we had an issue um, where we, yeah, I guess hired a fake guy, which has a fake GitHub. And if you, they had 1,000 repositories, but if when we started working with him, uh, they fake everything. We had a call with him, and then they had the deep fake call,
They did?
which which was funny because when you look at the repository, you will actually see that repository of the deepfake uh, fork in their own, saying that they have created like a new version of it, and then they had 1,000 repositories, but the history of the commits were not public. But if you go to a repository, it will say, okay, I don't know, 5 years or something. But
Uh,
if you check the commits, they will only like change the metadata to say that the
oh,
Git
really?
hash, but the commits, all of them was the same day, and all of them was funny because all of them were test commit and had like 1,000 of it in each repository, and it was just all fake. Um, when we asked the person, he to like actually give us proof of his integrity or like I don't know a picture of ID or something, they actually they just run.
They
Um,
disappeared.
they disappeared. Um, so yeah, be careful out there.
Uh,
It's crazy.
I've heard like there's some industrial scale of North Korean remote IT workers.
Mm,
And that just seems like, I mean,
maybe yeah.
it's too bad
We
AI
found
can be
like
used for both good and bad.
yeah, we found like at some point it did had a like a LinkedIn profile, but it got deleted, and then we found like he had 1,000 like different names, different persons for looking for I guess jobs.
Yeah, I mean, you just do it at a scale.
Yeah, like if you pay attention, like the flags are there. Like I don't know, it
Yeah.
says 15 years AI experience. AI hasn't been around for 15
But
years.
it's like, why go after software companies or other developers? We are probably the most skeptical crowd. Yes, you will fool
Yeah,
some,
yeah,
but go after I think other remote capable jobs. I guess there aren't that many other remote first jobs.
yeah. That's true. Yeah,
How long
fun
ago was
facts.
that?
Well, he got fired last month.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so he lasted for six
So,
months.
wait, so he was on the team for six
Yeah,
months
yeah, six
and
months.
got
We had a
payroll.
call. We had he got payroll and everything. I mean, we had constantly calls like every 2 days calls with him. Most of the time he wouldn't have the camera, but sometimes he did. And if you see the repository, like the deep fake repository, which is really famous right now, the biggest one, the photos of the video is blurry, like really
Uh,
blurry, and looks like I don't know 90s camera.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
His video looks exactly like that.
And
Then
what?
again, it was there. The flags
Ah,
were there.
wow.
Little things like we started to like question him. And funny enough, he did kind of a good job in some places, but we started to like question because he fucked up where some of the commits didn't have his username, and we were like,
Uh,
how this happened, you know? And we started to dig in. That's why because when he was hired, we expected the company to already do all like background checks and everything. So
yeah.
he wasn't the thing, we actually it's not like you question a guy when you're talking, right? you know. So
But yeah, I mean,
uh,
I don't know if conventional background checks are even enough in a remote first.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah, it's not. Because we asked for a deep background check when we noticed this, and that's when he uh, like said, "Well, bye. I will not give you that,
Yeah.
and see you."
And I mean,
Disappeared.
in remote first capacity or things like that, it's like there has to be why am I drawing a blank? A note like a notary type experience,
Yeah,
but well, I don't think a notary would be capable of spotting forgery or things like that. And if a person is already breaking the law just by applying, they don't care about submitting forged documents. So how does one
yeah.
validate actual
I
like
We asked for a picture of the lady and a picture of outside his home.
hmm,
That's when he said nope, which might be like the idea. I don't. The home part, I might be skeptical of that one, but the ID, you already have all that information, so it's just not wouldn't be
maybe it just comes
considered.
back to 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, and you have to prove your direct lineage in some way by first person validation and vouching. That does bring up this idea of vouch. Has there been any more news about vouch? This was, Mitchell Hashimoto's project to try and build a trust network.
Oh wow,
So yeah,
I haven't seen that one. That's cool.
yeah, I'll share that as well here.
Mhm.
It's a good one. All right. Moving on. So one of the challenges with AI development is you can produce so much, but you can't really, it takes a lot of effort to validate it. And to an extent, like anybody who's been vibe coding or these or developing this way, and even practicing test-driven development, doing writing the test first and then the implementation, it's hard to know what you don't know. It's hard to know what you're not testing for, especially as the volume of code increases. And there's, picture tells a thousand words. We are so quick to spot problems with things if we just inspect it. So how do you kind of industrialize that validation process? And we talked about a similar project for CLI validation. I forgot what it was called right now. But this is a similar concept. But what's nice about it is it helps you streamline video recording and screenshots so you can have your AI agent perform the validation for you and get a video that you can watch and review. Obviously, there's stuff like this one can do relatively easy just with headless Chrome or Chromium, but this is turning it into a CLI, so you get a more consistent experience for that. So something I'd like to check out. And in terms of auditing, the project does have at least 400 stars, and the developer has been around at least apparently for some time. Another interesting project that caught my eye. There was another one I saw, but it was very boring because I saw I could only reproduce about two or three services on AWS. But if anybody's been around for a while, you've seen Local Stack. Local Stack has a long history. I don't know. The project's probably been around for at least 10 years at this point or more. Local Stack is a great project, and I want to support them. They have changed their model, and the community edition of Local Stack has a reduced set of services that you can use for local development. I do think that this is actually something that should be supported by the clouds themselves, at least for the most common services. There's no expectation that all like 300 AWS services could be run locally in emulation mode, but for at least the common things that you build modern apps on, it would be nice. So this is a service that you can run locally that lets you at least have basically a mock backend for these things here. Notably is the ones that we use a lot, right? S3, Elasticache, IAM, STS, so like assume role operations and so forth. I'm sure this is just the start, and you can see where like this is something that is very automatable through AI. So check that out. And the history on this, yeah, 1,700 stars. I take that. I guess these days you can buy stars so easily. So what does that mean? So let's check out the author. Looks like they've been active for a long time as well. So. This was interesting. I think we talked about something similar. There was another startup out of Y Combinator that was introducing a payments protocol. This is one of those things where I don't think good ideas are essentially not defensible at all anymore. And it really depends on who you are and your clout and your reach, I think, to be able to launch certain types of companies. This would be one of those, I think. I would hate to try and compete against Stripe on a payments protocol system. An agentic way to handle transactions, presumably with some, approval integrations there. Then on to a few of my favorite topics. Atmos. So if you've adopted Atmos, Atmos is our IAC framework. One of the things that makes Atmos really unique is it handles identities, multiple identities, and it supports out of the box Azure, GCP, AWS, and all the variants of that. So whether you're running it in GitHub Actions and OIDC, whether you're using single sign-on, whether you're using users, etc. A complex thing that every company doing any form of IAC has to solve. So Atmos handles that. One of the things that we didn't support out of the box was this concept that you might need to have multiple identities active at the same time. For example, you need an identity active with GCP and an identity active with AWS so you can create a peering connection across clouds or across accounts in AWS, and the list goes on. So Atmos now handles that. We call the concept required. So you can specify which identities are required, and you run this component, in this case, the core network, sorry, this is the auth configuration here. When you set it up in your component, you can specify multiple identities as required, and they'll automatically be authenticated. So I'm going to show you a little bit related to that. But the other related announcement is we support now isolated identities for web console access. One of the annoying things on AWS, at least, is by design, the cookie namespace is browser wide, so to say. So you cannot be signed in multiple times in the same browser session. And that's probably a good thing. So you know exactly which tab you are in, for example. Now, there are Chrome plugins that you can use, like extended role switcher and so forth, but that still requires configuration there. A design principle for Atmos Auth from the beginning was if you clone a repo, that's all you need to do, and then Atmos Auth works. So everyone in the organization or the team doesn't need local configuration just to get authentication working. And not only that, it works in your GitHub action pipelines and so forth without installing another GitHub action with another supply chain attack. So I want to show you how that works with a practical example of something that I've been dabbling with over the past couple weeks, and it's been pretty cool. So I'm going to show you guys a demo of using Atmos with the AWS MCP servers for FinOps with Claude Code. So AWS has probably 70 MCP servers at this point, very specialized services that run. They're all Python packages you can install with UV, which is the popular package manager for Python projects. And then FinOps is this idea where you can interrogate Cost Explorer and get information out of AWS just by chatting conversationally with Claude. But all those MCP servers, they themselves need auth. So we have that configured here in this example that I'm going to show you. So let's see here. All right, now I'm going to change my screen share to the desktop. All right, everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Thanks, Nina. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here is run Atmos Auth, and I'm going to start a console session with a specific profile I have for the AWS Marketplace. So under that profile in Atmos Auth, I can have any number of identities, and I have this one configured right now that lets me log in here. So this logged in and it started an isolated browser session, signed in to that account, and I can just navigate here as I would ordinarily. I've already signed in previously and accepted like the 24-hour SSO session. So that's why this was easy and I have the information right here. Now, some of the things that I've done in Atmos and why Atmos is such an awesome tool for teams is I can do things like add custom commands to Atmos. So we have this one command that is the entry point into our platform, our infrastructure. Some of these are native commands. Some of these are custom commands. When I say native, that means some of these come from Atmos itself and some I've added. So one of those I've added is this MCP sub-command section for AWS, for managing my AWS MCP servers. So anyone on the team who would clone this repo can easily get set up with that. And simply running AWS MCP install will now we'll install all those MCP servers. And what's pretty cool about this is installing each one of those, and yet I don't have UV installed. I'm going to show you a little bit more on the config side how that's made possible. So in Atmos, I've set up these custom commands that are basically in this workflow file. If you've seen task file, it's similar to that, except for if you use task file, you're still going to have to figure out all the other pieces and install all the other tools just to get this operation done. Here, I don't need to do that because here what I can do is define a custom command. I called it under MCP. I created another subsection called AWS with another subsection called install. And here I have a shell script. This could call an external command, or it could call an external shell script and so forth. Let's see what else I want to point out here. Then the next thing I did was set up, I guess what I should do is show the outcome first, but I'm just going to show one more thing here. I have this mcp.json file. This is what configures the MCPs that Claude Code will automatically use. Here you can see what I did was I tell it to run Atmos MCP AWS start for this MCP service here. Under the hood, this is calling this Atmos custom command, and under the hood, this is using Atmos Auth. So it's starting this command with a cost report or with the credentials that I need in order to be able to use these AWS MCP servers. So in the end, what I'm able to do is something like this. I can just say, what were the costs by day per service for the past week? So the tool that I'm in is called Conductor. It's just a pretty GUI on top of Claude Code and uses the Claude Code SDK. While this is running here, I'm going to show you. So then I developed a skill here that just tells how to use these MCP servers and what's available, what our account structure is, and so forth. And as we want to get more detailed on what we want our reports like, we just add it to the skill. So it performed a tool search. It found a good tool to use for this, one of our configured MCP services. Now it's going to start up that MCP service using Atmos Auth and talk to it. Then it's going to format all that data. And here's my table of cost usage over the past week. So what was really cool about this to me is if anyone cloned this repository in our organization and had the requisite AWS permissions, all they need to do is start talking to Claude. They didn't need to set up Auth. They didn't need to set up MCP servers. They didn't need to set up any of that stuff because it happens automatically just because they're using Atmos as an IAC framework. Any questions?
No question, but I like this cost. This especially for me will be awesome.
I think for a lot of people,
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
No, sorry, that's it.
One of the things I can't stand as an AWS partner is using the AWS console for everything and creating offers and registering opportunities. Well, the cool thing is there are APIs for all that. The last several offers I've sent out, I can just talk to Claude. I give it the contract. It converts it to PDF, uploads it to S3, creates the private offer. I review that as a draft, submit it, done. One of the most tedious, boring things I've had to do, and now Claude can do that for me. So MCPs are the way to go. Or CLIs, thin CLIs. We'll be posting more about this. I did start a pull request for this, but I don't know yet when we will have time to merge it. But it has my code examples at least in there. So I'll share it here. It's an open pull request. What I want to do is add more gists to Atmos because there's just so many cool things you can do with it like this that we're using it for everything. And in this gist, you'll see exactly what I did. You'll probably need to customize it for your use case. This wasn't generalized so that anyone can use it. It gives you the gist of it and how to go about it. From the skills you need to the Atmos configuration, to the MCP server configuration that I talked about, as well as the README for this project. All right. So that's all I got for today. Any interesting topics we should discuss? Any interesting projects?
I just had a question about your Atmos Auth.
Mhm.
Um, I'm looking at setting up Atmos, and in one of the scenarios where our Terraform runs, we have a sort of a privileged jump box. We don't want to give SSO credentials to engineers that have write access. So we essentially have like a PAM solution for that jump box, so they can ask for just-in-time access to it, and the SSH session is all fully audited, so that we can replay it. But in order to support that, the Atmos Auth seems like it's missing one scenario for me, which would be that it could use like the credential source from AWS config, because essentially that box has an instance profile, right, that allows it to do everything in all our accounts. So I was wondering whether that was something you would consider adding in, essentially, like you could do role chaining based on.
Yeah, so Atmos Auth supports role chaining today. I haven't tried to set up exactly what you're describing, but I'll show you an example that's public for role chaining. And we've talked about it on office hours before. Under profiles here, like for GitHub, here you can see how we're exchanging an OIDC token. We're using this provider here to assume this role.
Right.
Uh, to use an instance profile, I think it's probably supported. I just don't off the top of my head know what the syntax would be.
Okay. Yeah, no, I figured that it would need its own provider, sort of, because it's not OIDC and it's not SSO. It's kind of, it's a
But it's
different.
just the IMDS service, which is handled by the SDK automatically. So
Right.
it might be even less configuration than you see here. But I wouldn't be surprised if we support it. At a minimum, though, I'm going to take that as a note back to document how that would
Cool.
work. And
Cool.
if it's not supported for some reason, we'll add support for it.
Cool.
Yeah.
In theory, you will only need to put changes some role to profile and that's it. Huh? Because
Say that
it's
say that
in
again.
theory, you should only change the instead of principal some role, you should only have principal profile. Uh, with the provider being instead of GitHub RDC, it will be AWS. Yeah, AWS CLI. So
Yeah.
identity provider.
I'll post a doc and share some more information. Are you in the Atmos channel,
Yeah.
Charles? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll post a link to the PR later on. I'll open one up and document how that works.
That'd be awesome. Thanks.
Cool. I think one of the cool things also at some point in the future would be to support the just-in-time or like approval of assumed roles, but through a centralized dashboard somewhere. So there could be another person who approves that operation.
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah.
I think Granted supports that out of the box today, but that's part of their commercial solution. John?
Yeah, hi Eric. I'm John. I'm a semi-long time listener, second time here. So this is cool. I've been watching your videos now for a while, and I love all the talk. I had a question, Eric. Have you or anybody else been? I know you guys have seen these local context database managers like Supermemory or anything like that. Have you
Yeah, yeah,
guys? I know that they're trying to do different things like with like be better than RAG or doing some graph
yeah.
database stuff. And I think, all the important things right now is all around context management and your context window. So have you guys tried any of these local context database thingies to keep your context across long-winded sessions and
I
stuff?
No, but I want to, and I've really enjoyed that as part of OpenClaw. Jeremy White, this sounds like something in your category, maybe?
Um, I really started to so it's funny. Right now I'm actually trying out Paperclip, and
Oh,
I
you're
will say that one of the fun things about a ticketing system between agents, they tend to control their context really well. So, something like that database probably is going to be needed though, because I can see that once you get to a few hundred tickets, this is probably going to get slower. But I haven't used any purpose-built sort of context management things like that. I've mostly worked on and this is maybe going to sound very much like my neckbeardy self. I've been enjoying OpenSpec a lot because I find that having if you do multi-agent, having an agent that always just is sitting there looking at what changes are going through commits, creating specs, validating specs, sometimes creating a change and then kicking off another job to your engineering agent and
Mhm.
letting that tidy up your specs. Um, it's felt like right now the disk is fast enough. And most of the time I've worked on projects where when that grows too big for the disk, oftentimes I just split the project up. So I'll just have the OpenSpec agent go and take the specs that I'm working with and put them into another like sort of set of into another OpenSpec directory. So I know that doesn't sound like a great answer to your question, but I mean I that's some of the stuff I've done to manage context because I'll work on things that have just tons and tons of context. And I'd be interested to try one out. You were saying which one was it again, John?
Super memory? So,
Sleeper memory, yeah,
it's you have to weed through, as we all know, the thousands of loads of crap that are coming out, and this one seems to have the
Yeah.
least
yeah.
amount of crap. So, um,
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see how it works because they say things like it has the automatic ability to purge context out when it doesn't deem it as relevant anymore. So, I don't want I don't want just to manage another local database myself, and have to
That's
trim it.
fair.
So,
Yeah, and the more that I get used to using Tailscale with some of the stuff, the more that a solution like this doesn't sound that bad if I just make it once and I just use it around as long as, things are connected to Tailscale, then, who cares where it's running? Um, but that'd be fun to try out.
Did you also see that somebody brought this to my attention? Claude now dreams. It said, right, when you dream, you compact memories or run through them. Claude now does that automatically to create a better memory system.
wow, that's a clever name.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Uh,
Much better than compact.
yeah. Any
Cool.
other interesting? Yeah, for sure,
Thanks for
John.
letting
Good
me
to see you
ask.
on the show here. Any other interesting discoveries or questions for the group here? Open mic for anyone.
I would just throw it out there as well that Paperclip works great so far for Codex and Claude, but it's definitely just been vibe coded barely for Pi and open code. So expect to just go ahead and point point something at the adapters directory, and you'll probably get it working in a few minutes because it's very low hanging fruit kind of bugs.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I've really enjoyed it. I think it's useful enough and it's easy enough to set up that I might keep one running for just different projects.
Do you know what the pros and cons are between SpecKit by GitHub and OpenSpec?
Oh yeah, I can speak to that kind of specifically. I think that OpenSpec has a maintainer's perspective. So OpenSpec has not just archiving of changes, but a syncing mechanic to it, and they also let you create a workflow for moving specs into subdirectories and organizing them.
Mm,
I don't think you get a lot of the organization and maintenance features in SpecKit. I think there's a few, but and I should go back and check it again. It's been about, I don't feel like it's been a year. But I guess maybe nowadays we should be talking in quarters rather than years for when you go back to try a new project or an old project. But yeah, last time I tried SpecKit, it was good for the first few changes, and then after you're done with your spike, good luck integrating that and making sense of it. Because if you have any conflicting specs between different things, there's no real path to resolve that conflict in SpecKit, whereas there's a specific process for that in OpenSpec.
that's insight. Yeah, that's good insight. Hmm. And are you using OpenSpec together then with Paperclip? Are they
In places,
mutually?
yeah. And it's
Hmm.
it's neat because so here's I'll give you that and my little skunkworks project that I'm going with it. So basically, um first for OpenSpec, it's really nice to just create an auditor in
Mm,
Paperclip that owns OpenSpec. And then give it all of the skills and everything else for it, and have everybody else report when they're making changes to get their specs lined up. And it's been great. I've watched tickets like just going across my screen of, hey, this changes the spec. Oh, these two things need to be resolved. Sometimes if there's an error, I'll get something in my inbox as the board, right? That you have to go and resolve two things that conflict. But it's been actually kind of fire and forget for the open spec process. Maybe the commit logs are a little bit weird. I don't have a good solution for that. The only other thing that really I think helps a lot though with doing spec development is they do grow. And if you have everything in a flat folder, it's not great. So what I've started to do is create domain models, and I'm about done with a tool that basically what it does. I don't know how to do it yet with Claude Code and Codex, but I know with Pi, I'm just having the agents say what their domain is that they're working on and what entity in that domain they're working with every time they do some sort of action. And then that gets validated as to whether or not that agent is allowed to do that, or they're given a prompt to wait, you should send this to such and such.
Hmm.
And if you're doing domain modeling, and I don't know
Paperclip
how,
is the enforcer of that, or is like the director of that?
oh no, just the tool. So I'm having the tool be something that just they run
The
as
tool
a
you're
part.
writing, the tool you're working on.
Yeah, yeah. So that's just
Okay.
my little skunkworks project, but it would be something that anybody here could probably do as well. So I'd encourage you
Yeah.
to try it out if you've never done domain modeling. You create the idea of entities within domains that can only have only a perimeter that can be crossed on certain topics, such as if I have the database, then I could model a user, right? But I'm not supposed to manage, say, authentication. So you create just a quick config file
That
that
makes
says,
sense. Yeah.
here's my domains, here's what they own, and then every time an agent tries to do something, if it tries to do something in the wrong place, they get directed. And then
Yeah.
also OpenSpec knows exactly where to put its specs. And so I've been slowly working on that, and it makes it hyper organized. I just need a little more time to fart with it before I would share it with
Well, why don't
everything
you,
else.
yeah, when it's a little further along, and only if you want to, why don't you do a demo one of
Oh
these
yeah.
office hours and see what you're working on? I'd be curious to learn more about that.
Oh yeah, it's all, infrastructure stuff. So to me, it models better in domain stuff, whereas I'm sure with
Yeah.
other
I mean, I
projects it
totally
wouldn't.
relate to the problem that you brought up because like what's
Oh
worked
yeah,
really
your
well for us.
folder, and yeah, I was just gonna say, don't you have like a bunch of yeah, these
Yeah,
PRDs?
yeah, we've been doing PRDs for every new feature for the past 6 months or so, and it's been great. But I think it could at some point, right? You need an information hierarchy, you need a information
Oh yeah,
architecture, and
and
that's
then
what
and
you're
I'm gonna
describing.
be the first thing I'm gonna do with this actually is use ADRs. So I'm going to have ADRs be how domains are defined,
Hmm.
and that sort of a thing. So there's going to be strong association with decisions about architecture, and when you're in your domain, you're allowed to really look up and understand those specs, and then everything else you ask other agents about that. So hopefully I'll get to where I have a cohesive team, and I don't think you would have to use Paperclip for something like that. So that's why I wanted to make a standalone tool.
Yeah, it's interesting times to be in, that's for sure. Like others
Oh
said,
yeah.
is like we're all building our own like perfect tools, and it's interesting. We're all carpenters here.
Oh
Um,
yeah, hand tools, right?
Hand
If
tools, yeah.
nobody's ever seen that, look up. I think it's in the Closure Talks on YouTube somewhere. Somebody talks about hand tools. It's a great talk
Mm,
about not just functional programming, but how to take your craft and have it work for you as an artisan.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for chiming in on that, Jeremy. I appreciate it. Let's call it for today. We are almost at time here. So we'll be posting a recording of this session to our YouTube channel in just about an hour or two. So check it out there if you want to refer back to it. We offer commercial support at Cloud Posse for all of our open source, including Atmos. So if you're interested to learn more about that, go to cloudposse.com/support. We have lots of ways for you to get involved in our community. If you aren't yet, you can go to cloudposse.com/office hours to register for today's session. These are recurring weekly events. We have our YouTube channel. You'll find all of our past recordings, our Slack team, as well as a monthly newsletter. And if you sign up for that now, you'll probably get the one that goes out beginning of April. So sign up for our newsletter. Thanks everyone for your time today, and I'll see you next week.